All right, well, everybody gets in here. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. It's going to be a great conversation that we're going to have this evening. So, stick with us. We do have a chat feature, a Q&A section down there. So you should be able to put your questions into the chat or the Q&A area. So use the Q&A as a chat if you would like to. You're more than welcome to put questions there. Introduce yourself if you want to, put in there so we know who's in the room. You can use the Q&A section for that. We'd love to see who's here with us this evening. Just put your name and your business. That'd be great. Put it into the Q&A area so we can just read it and be like, hey, use it as a chat for right now. Questions are coming in already. All right, let's get started, man. Listen, so good evening. My name is Kelsey Maynard. I am the small business advocate for Invest Atlanta. Now, Invest Atlanta is the economic development arm of the city of Atlanta, where the mayor sits at the head of our board. And we really focus on taking businesses when our particular sector is working to make sure businesses go from surviving to thriving. And so what we do with our monthly webinars series is to make sure that we're bringing resources to our business owners, that we give you access to the plentiful resources that are around us, and then make sure that we are addressing the very concerns and opportunities that I think will benefit you. If you say, hey, you know what, we were talking about government contracts for the last year, and a lot of business owners were like, hey, either I don't know how to do contracts, I've never done them before, I'm curious to get into the industry, I want to learn about how to get government contracts and federal contracts, I just don't know, I don't have the information. And so this whole month we'll be talking about government contracts. And tonight specifically, we're going to be going over the one-on-ones of just learning what government contracts are. So this night is called Unlocking Opportunities. We're talking about ATLinBusiness Marketplace that we have and how this is a gateway to get to government contracting. So tonight will really be almost like government contracting 101. And it's really exciting because I'm going to sit here and learn with you. So I will be asking the questions for you all. So don't worry if something's happening too fast. You're like, I don't understand what that acronym means. Me either. So don't worry, I will ask. So be ready to be engaged today. Before we get started, I know you're going to start asking me questions in this Q&A section. So before we even get there, let me tell you this. Yes, this will be recorded and it will be emailed to you tomorrow. So you'll get the recording, the link to the recording, and whatever presentation we have will be sent to you as well. So we can hold that question because yes, it will be recorded and sent to you. Secondly, if you have any questions, again, put them into the Q&A section. I understand that sometimes we have questions because they happen right there. I don't want you to hold on to it. Just put into the Q&A. And towards the end of this presentation, we will go through the Q&A to make sure that we answer all of your questions. And that's how this will go. So before we get started, I want to introduce a couple people that are with me today. One being Ashley. Ashley Reveley is new to Invest Atlanta. I'm fairly new, but she is an amazing addition to our team. She actually handles the Wells Fargo Open for Business program that we have here in Invest Atlanta that covers our loan programs, our commercial property improvement, our the commercial acquisition, down payment assistance, and many other programs, our technical assistance as well. So she has her hands in so many of our projects right now. And so we're really excited to have her on the call today as we discuss also the marketplace, the ATLinBusiness Marketplace. And then we also have Danielle Jones. Danielle Jones, the one I'll be actually doing the presentation today, and she represents the Urban League on one of our programs with the ATLinBusiness Business Consulting. And so we're excited to have her here as she's going to tell us about government contracting and how she does and how she helps other businesses get into it. And then at the end, I'll let you know how you can get in contact with Danielle by using our program, our business consulting that you can access at no cost for being a City of Atlanta business. So let's get started. Danielle, come on in here. How are you doing?
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing me to be on this webinar today. I always enjoy, I have been working in government contracting since 2015. I've done numerous webinars, classes, and mentorship, and I always love this topic. I always love talking about it and always like teaching it. And I'm also a government contractor myself. So, everything that I'm telling you today is stuff that I do in my day-to-day business. And that's how I operate. I've been in the business since 2015. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and share my screen, and I have a presentation for you guys today. This is something I will share with you. There's going to be a lot of resources on it, so please don't get concerned about trying to write down every single website. I wouldn't concern yourself with that. I will share this information with you, and I think there's a little delay. Give me just a second. I'm clicking it, y'all. Trying to make it in. There we go. All right. So today we'll talk about, of course, and I'm gonna take my picture off real quick so that way I don't distract you guys with my face while I'm trying to talk. Okay. All right, so today we're going to talk about selling your products to the government. Oh, we have another delay. It's not working. Oh, there we go. Selling your products to the government. I promise you it's going to get better from here, you guys. So I think everything on the glitches are worked out. Again, my name is Danielle Jones. I am the founder and CEO of Exemplary Support Services, which we also go by ESS Group. Again, we are government contractors ourselves. We provide training and development services, professional services, PMP, which is project management, program management, and other administrative services directly to the government. We do that on the state, local. We also do that on the federal. We're getting into federal contracting this year. And we also do international work. And just FYI, I'm gonna throw this term out here, which is called OCONUS, by the way, in the federal space. So we do nationwide, and we're also contracting internationally. I have over 15 years of management, leadership, and government contracting and strategic planning. So prior to my firm contracting directly with the government, I was a consultant, and I worked with, oh man, hundreds of companies before I decided to pivot, where I, did proposal writing, I managed proposal teams, I did contract management, capture management, which is something different, than business development, but I also did business development as well. I managed a variety of projects, multi-million dollars, again, both nationwide and internationally, for other firms, as well as for myself. And we do mentor other business. We do have an ESS Academy where we do mentor other businesses as well. And so we have a very robust program where we offer online courses. And for those who are really ready to apply what they learn, because I know we get tired of being in information stage sometimes, especially if you're a little bit more advanced, we do offer mentorship as well. So that's just a little bit of background on who I am. So today, what we're going to just talk about the very, very basics of government contracting, right? We're not going to dig too deep in because there's a lot of foundational pieces that are missed along the way. And so we're going to focus on how to get started, what you need to have, how to find opportunities, and we're going to touch base on certifications and strategic partnerships. So how do we get started? Before we even get into, oh, you need all of these different registrations, you really need to understand what government contracting is. It's a procurement process. Okay, so the government procurement process is a process by which the government uses to acquire goods and services that it needs to purchase from businesses. And so what that means is that the government, using taxpayer dollars, obviously they have to spend their money in a transparent way. They can't just swipe a credit card on Amazon or just Google a company and decide that they're going to do business with them. Now, can they use credit cards for purchases? Yes, but still it goes through a procurement process. So they have this established procurement process, and this allows them to buy anything, whether it's a product or a service, and that's in which way that they buy those things. So how do you get started with doing business with the government, right? So we know the government needs to buy our stuff. And another thing I want to point out, the government is the largest buyer in the entire world. You have to think about it. The government has, of course, the federal government, which has the military. So they have more branches and more opportunities to buy products and services than they do in the commercial market. And sure, they have well more opportunities to buy than the consumer market. So just keep that in mind, that the government is the largest buyer in the world. So how do you sell your products and services to them. First, you want to identify what products and services you want to sell to the government. That's probably one of the trickiest things that I deal with when I work with companies is, okay, they may sell candles, or, they may have janitorial services. I even had a client that sold hair, right? And we actually were able to incorporate that into the government space, right? He sold bundles of hair. And he said, there's no way that the government will buy that. Well, yeah, they absolutely do. And we were able to help him get a contract with the VA for research purposes for those veterans that were dealing with hair loss, dealing with any type of chemical damage. There was a research done behind it. They also needed it for mannequins. We found a slew of ways to, use his products in the government space. But the first thing you want to do is identify that, right? Identify your product or service, and how can you translate that into the government market? Once you do that, the next thing you want to do is identify your NAIDS codes. So that's the NAIDS codes. If you're not really sure what a NAIDS code is, it stands for the North American International Consumer, International North American Industry Consumer Codes. I just went through a brain fart, so I apologize about that. And so it's really important to identify that, because what that is that is your industry code. Industry code. That is the code that the government uses to identify what you actually provide. So our company, we provide, again, training services. There's an industry code for training services. If you provide janitorial services, there's an industry code for that. If you, again, sell any type of clothing or IT services, there's a specific industry code for each one of those items, and you want to identify as many as possible that fit in what you do. So for instance, you can have as many NAIDS codes as possible. You typically want to identify your primary NAIDS code. What does your business actually do? And if there's any subsequent NAIDS codes underneath that, you can provide that as well. So again, I like to use examples for our company. We have a program management NAIDS code or professional services NAIDS code, but we also have administrative services, educational services, training and development. So we have several different NAIDS codes that explain what our company does and what we provide. As you're doing this research into identifying what products and services you want to sell to the government, you can also research. This is a special little tool called usaspending.gov, right? This is a website used by the government that allows you to be open and transparent, or allows the government, to be open and transparent about how they're spending their money. You can see how all the agencies in the federal government are spending. You can see what they're projecting to spend, and you can also see what they have spent in previous years. This also allows you to identify what you want to do with them, because you can see if they're actually spending money in your area, especially if you have a really niche service that you provide. A customer that I did work with in the past before sold art. This was very, again, niche, very unique, different from, very similar to the guy that I work with that sold the bundles of hair. Had the same mindset of feeling that, oh, I sell art, there's no way that this is going to incorporate into the government space. Well, they absolutely do buy art too. It goes into their buildings. They use it for different purposes. So yes, they absolutely do buy that too. And you can also check out how they're spending in your industry per your NAIDS code. There's more things that you can do with USA spending. I'm not going to dig too deep into that, because again, we're going to keep this very, very high level, kind of skim of the surface. And I don't want to dig too deep into all the things that USA Spending does, but take some time to go on that website, feel around, and you can see all the information that you have access to that allows you to determine, what services you want to provide, who's out there making money, who's winning contracts, and so forth.
I'm gonna ask you to give me a couple more examples about this USA spending though, because
Okay.
you piqued a couple people's interest when you said, "Wait, we can go on there as artists, as art, and this." Wait, slow down. So talk about that just a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you go on usaspending.gov, again, you can see the projections of what the government is going to spend, right? What their budget is for the year. And it actually breaks down agency by agency, what their budget is for the year. You can see previous years where they spent the money in different agencies and different industries, right? So what I mean by industry, I mean what businesses actually do per your industry code, which is your NAICS codes, right? And let me get that right. So it's actually North American Industry Classification System. My brain went completely blank when I was trying to explain that, but that's actually what NAICS code stands for, by the way. And so another thing that you can do is check contracts, right? So you can actually see who is winning contracts, the actual companies, the dollar amount, the agency, if there's a subcontractor on it, how many people bid on it, where the project's located. There's so much information that you can get from that. So when you go on USA Spending, it's actually on the top bar, you can see awarded contracts. And there's a search bar on the left-hand side. And again, this is going to be something, it's very condensed, but if you have the opportunity to go on usaspending.gov, look at awarded contracts, and then utilize that left-hand bar, you'll be able to just, have some fun with it, initially getting into it to see, okay, who is actually winning contracts. You can search by NAICS codes, you can search by agencies, and you'll be amazed. You'll see some multi-billion-dollar contracts right on there. You're like, oh, wow, $1 billion. So they're going to be larger corporations, of course. They're not going to be small businesses getting billion-dollar contracts because they actually, if small businesses are capped out at a certain dollar amount anyway. So if you see a multi-billion-dollar contract, it's probably going to be a large business getting that. But yeah, and then you can click on the actual contract number, or you can click on the awardee name. And that's when you can just start digging in and see, okay, who awarded that contract to them. You can, again, click on it to see how many people actually went after that award. And the fun thing you can also do is go to the Federal Procurement Data System, which is fpds.gov. And it's somewhat of a spinoff of usaspending.gov where you can do some additional research as well. So this will help you really understand. So for those who are artists and really trying to understand, okay, this is going to be a fit for me, which we had to do this with, like I said, that client I worked with before literally sold art. Seeing how much is the government actually spending in that area and who is buying it, right? So you don't want to just go out there throwing darts, marketing to the wrong agencies, because there's a lot of small business development centers out there. There's a lot of OSTABUs out there, which are basically just small business offices, right, that assist you in the federal government. So there's a lot of them. So you don't want to spend your time and your wheels making connections with the wrong people. Just do a little bit of research and say, okay, I see that DoD is really spending a lot in my area. Maybe I need to focus on those small business offices and those contracting officers, when I'm starting to do my marketing for my business. Or even looking for and I'll tap into that later, so I don't want to do too much with that, but that would also spin off into your strategic partners, right? How do I determine the right partners? But I'll table that for later because that's going to be on one of the other slides. Does that help elaborate a little bit more?
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. It also helps you do a competitive analysis. The government market is no different from the consumer, and it's no different from, the business B2B. So you have B2C, which is business consumer. You have B2B, which is business to business, right? So your clientele is another business. And then you have B2G, which is the government space. So just like we do a competitive analysis and a market research in our consumer market, which is we want to find the demographics of our target, age group, income, all of that stuff that we do in the consumer market. And we also do a competitive analysis, right? So after we find out who our target audience is, we also want to know who are they buying from, who are our competitors. Well, that's no different from the government space either. So technically, this is when you're doing your target audience, right? Identifying your products, identifying who you want to sell to, but you also want to determine what services they provide in agencies that they have the most success with. So companies that are doing the same thing you're doing. How do you, which is a nice little word, benchmark companies that you identified that are doing similar services to yours and track what has made them successful. So you do that in the government space as well. And a way to do that, by the way, let me bring it back up to usaspending.gov. You can use usaspending.gov as a tool for that as well. Now, this is one of those condensed slides that I mentioned earlier, and I promise you I'm going to try my best not to bore anyone on this call. You will get a copy of this, so I'm not going to go verbatim for everything that's on this slide because I know it's very, very condensed. But these are just quickly some things that you need to have. Register your business with the state. I can't tell you how many times, I have been approached about government contracting where, the person didn't feel like they needed to have a business. They're thinking contract. Okay, so if I just type up a contract or the government types up a contract and I just provide the service, or even worse, I've heard this plenty of times, I'll just get somebody else to do the work and I'll just have this it's definitely not that. Now, is that impossible? Have people done that? Yes, right. Just have a contract with the government, have someone else do it, but that is very frowned upon. There's a lot of consequences to that. There's a lot of pitfalls to that, and that's not a practice that you want to get into. However, first and foremost, regardless of anything, you do have to register your business with the state. It can be an LLC, it can be a corporation, it can be a partnership, but you do have to have a business to do to contract with the government. Because again, like I mentioned earlier, contracting with the government is a procurement process. All they want to do is get products or services from another business. They can't do that the way we do that in, the private sector. So, they actually absolutely have to have that. Of course, you need to have your EIN. There's a resource on here where you can get your EIN. You still want to get your DUNS, even though DMB, and this is also somewhat of a misconception. Yes, the federal government has gone away with the DUNS number, right? They did it, I think it's about 2 years ago now, April 2022. Don't quote me on that, but I know it's about spring, about a couple years ago. They did get, the federal government no longer uses the DUNS number to identify your business. They now use a UEI, and you will get that through your SAM registration, which I'll talk about in just a second. But you still want to get a DUNS number. You still want to get a DUNS number because sometimes it does still apply to certain certifications that you're trying to get. You may want to join a supplier diversity program with a large corporation. They may require your DUNS number. There may be other instances where government contracting is involved, and you will still need a DUNS number. And again, these are resource websites on here for you. It just doesn't apply, in the federal space. You need to have a business bank account. You definitely need to have a business bank account. Credit unions are great if you're just starting up because they typically work better with small businesses as far as getting credit, loans, sometimes a little bit easier with a credit union than it is with a regular bank like Wells Fargo or Truist or Bank of America. And of course, identify your NAIDS codes that I mentioned earlier. You definitely want to identify those. And this is something that even though SAM is mainly focused on the federal government, right? So that's what your SAM registration's for. You still want to have your SAM registration, even if you're thinking about only doing business on the state and local level. Why do I say that? You're like, okay, if I don't want to do business with the federal government, if I only want to do it with the local and state or education, how do I get it? Well, you never know what opportunity may arise in the federal space. You never know what subcontracting opportunity may arise where it requires you to have your SAM registration. It's not something that happens overnight. It can potentially take a couple weeks. And that's just the process that it goes through. Even if you get through your SAM registration quickly, it still doesn't happen overnight. There's a verification period. They have to assign you a cage code. You now have to get a unique entity identification number. All of that needs to be assigned to you. So, always prepare for at least a week or two to get the SAM. And that's if everything goes smoothly. There would have been cases where it has taken people a few months, due to a lot of issues that I won't get into on this call, but it can happen, right? So you don't want a good opportunity come your way just because you want it to focus, on state, local, and education, where you don't have this in place and you can't pursue that opportunity with either another business or directly with the federal government. So we always make that a standard thing to do. And when you're on it, please take note of this. When you are going through your SAM registration, please do not forget about your SBA profile. There is going to be a little link it's normally close to the end of your registration where you will sign up, or you have to click on it and you have to actually go through your SBA profile. What that does is it gets you listed on the Dynamic Small Business Search, DSBS. And you definitely want to be listed on there. Again, I mentioned earlier, we are government contractors ourselves. We use the system to find teaming partners. We use the system to find resources. And I have been contacted several times over the years, even recently been contacted because we were found on DSBS and someone was looking for services in our area. So you definitely don't want to skip that step. And another very good starting point that I want to mention is have your capability statement. It's a one-page business resume. We absolutely use it all the time. We use it all the time. I went to a networking event. I went to the NCMA Network Industry Day. I'm sorry, NCMA Industry Day. I think it was last Thursday. People are still passing out their capability statement in paper form. You know, mine is electronic, but that is one of the first things that people ask. Can I have your business card? Do you have a capability statement? We use them. Contracting officers will ask you for that.
Ooh. I want to move on so we can get through this, but I have a question. Talk
Okay.
about this capability statement real quick. Like, what is, you said like a business resume, but what if you're starting off like, and I don't have any past work with anybody. What do I put necessarily on a statement?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you asked that because that's going to be our next slide. We are
See,
going to
I'm
talk
good.
about it, and I will mention what it looks like for someone who's starting up, right? What does that look like for past performance? I pretty much already talked about this. It's a document that shows your business capabilities to potential clients or government agencies. And you typically want it to be a one-pager, right? You want a quick snapshot. But to your point, Kelsey, this is what you need to have on it. And this is just an example of ours, or one of ours. We have several, but this is one of our very basic forms or generalized forms. So you want to have, of course, like a company overview. You want to have your core competencies. And this is an older one, by the way, so for presentation purposes, but so we have different things on it now. But for example, this is what you would have, like, what do you do? So when someone looks at it, they just want to say, okay, quickly, who is this company? What do they do? Program, administrative and management services. What are the differentiators? You know, we have a DCA accounting system. Again, this is old, so we have a lot of different certifications that we have listed here now, but you want to put your differentiators right here. What is your past performance? So to your question, Kelsey, if you don't have any past performance with any government agencies, you can use private sector. So if you do have past performance in the the private sector, you can absolutely use that. It does not have to be a government contract as your past performance. All they want to know is, have you performed the work and what you're saying that you do and your core competencies. If you don't have any contracts, like, hey, I absolutely never, I wanted to start my business yesterday, but say for instance, you are in the medical or IT, you've been in the IT field, pretty much all your life, or at least recently, right? You've had a job or a career doing some type of IT services. You can absolutely use your job as your past performance, especially when you're starting out. You are your business. They just want to know that you are competent, really understand what you're providing to them. So if you're really familiar with everything that you need to know in the IT industry because you've worked in it for the past 10 years and you have your personal resume, you can absolutely use those jobs as your past performance. So if you did IT services, I don't know, for Deloitte, right? So Deloitte is part of your past experience because you have actually performed that work. Now, when you get into like a capability briefing or when you get into deeper conversations about it, you can explain. You don't necessarily say, well, that was my job, right? You don't really necessarily have to say that, but you can say it's work that we have performed, right? It's work that I performed. And you can go into detail about your knowledge on those specific, industry terms or your knowledge in the industry in general, and how you can provide and be of a service to the government in that space. Like, how will that translate into the government space? It's absolutely very common when you're just getting started out, to just use your personal resume, past experience as your company past performance. And then of course your NAICS codes. Well, I can tell that's old because that's not spelled right, but then you have your NAICS codes, and then you have PSC codes, your product service codes. It's an option to put the PSC codes on there. But some people do like to put their PSC codes, but for sure, the NAICS codes are more universally recognized.
What is a PSC code?
It's a product service code. It's another industry code. It is recognized, like I said, in other industries. Like you may see, say for instance, you're doing certain state registrations, or you're doing certain county registrations. They'll have their different names for industry codes. It's all the same, but
What
the
about the
most
SIC?
recognized. I'm sorry.
SIC? What's that? Same thing?
You said the what now?
You
I'm
said
sorry.
PSC code, and then there's a SIC code.
SIC code. Yes, SIC code is another one, right? That's another industry code. So you'll see industry codes. They're different ones out there, and different agencies may recognize different codes. I would say always
Mm-hmm.
have your NAICS codes. That's the most universally recognized, but you will see codes that are also labeled something else as well. So SIC codes, PSC, you can have all of those labeled on your capability statement, because you may market to an agency that recognizes SIC codes, or you may market to an agency or a customer or a large corporation, right? Because remember, there's supply diversity. You can do subcontracting opportunities. They may recognize PSC or use PSC or SIC codes. So it
What
is
is a
good
cage
to,
code?
I'm sorry.
What does cage code stand for?
So the cage
Cage.
code, yeah, so the cage code is something that is assigned to you when you are going through your SAM registration.
Okay, got
So
it.
all that is your commercial and government entity. It's like a 5-digit code that you get. Ours is listed up here, and it's another agency identifier. So mainly, I'll put it like this: DLA is mainly the one that uses that. So I know it's kind of one of those arbitrary things that you just kind of have. The DUNS and the UEI are the main ones that they use as your business identifier. Okay. The cage code is something that the Defense Logistic Agency, DLA, they're the ones that actually assign the cage code. DLA does things a little bit different, and they're the ones that actually assign that. You'll get an email when you go through your SAM registration. You'll actually get an email, to verify certain information before you get that. So that's something that's really recognized by the Defense Logistics Agency, and you will get assigned it. You'll be asked that when you're going through your certification process. You'll be asked your cage code as well as your UEI. So it's just another identification number, but again, mainly used by DLA. So yeah, so that's pretty much that. And so yeah, so you definitely want to have this available. And I do have it over here. It's optional depending on who your target customer is, who is actually going to recognize, what those are, what those industry codes are. So the different types of solicitations that are out there, right? So now that you've gotten all of that done, right? You have your business set up, you have your capability statement, and now you're ready to make some money, right? You want to go out there, find opportunities. Well, it's really important to understand what opportunities are out there. And I've seen this, right? Because I used to do proposal management services. And so I will have someone who's willing to pay me, a certain amount of money to write a proposal for them, and only to find out it's an RFI, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with RFI. But it's important for that person to know before you spend or invest that kind of money that they understood what an RFI means. So you have RFP, which is a request for proposal. You have the RFQ, which is a request for quote. And then you have RFI and sources sought. That's request for information. And sources sought is pretty much the same thing. It's used for market research, right? It does not result in an actual contract. They just send it out to the industry because they want more information on how they can actually create an RFQ or an RFP, or they need to know if there's anybody out there that can actually do what they're looking for. And if not, if they already have, say, for instance, a company that they have identified that can do something that's very niche, they will actually sole source that to that company and not put it out for procurement. So I'll dig a little bit deeper in the next slides, but that's what they're used for. It's just for informational purposes only. So what are the difference between all of them, right? So we have request for proposal, RFP. This is when multiple factors are considered to determine if the vendor is qualified, right? An RFP requires a proposal that includes technical, past performance, and price. So all of that's going to be included in a request for proposal. RFQ, very similar to bids, so also known as an invitation for bid, is when the government solicits contractors to submit price quotes. This requires a quote and is evaluated primarily on price. However, when it comes to RFQ, there are usually other factors such as past performance or even executive summary that could be required. So those are just examples. When you see an RFQ, just know that it may not be as condensed as an RFP, right? When you have to write a complete proposal with a technical approach, they may just obviously focus primarily on the price, but still they want to have a little bit more information about your company, right? They want to know if there's past performance. They want to know, can you actually perform this work or have you performed that work? Bids are similar and usually requires you to complete bid documents and give a quote. Bids are probably one of the easiest ones to go after because it doesn't require any additional information other than to fill out the required documents that are in the bid package, which will be in the solicitation. They'll ask you to complete that, give the quote for whatever product or service that they're asking you to do. And most likely it's going to be a product if it's a bid. And you just give a quote. A lot of times with bids, almost mass majority, I don't like talking in definitives by saying, oh, every bid is going to be lowest price. But I will say the mass majority of bids will be based on the lowest price, right? And it's typically used for products. Not that it's unheard of to use for services, but it's typically used for products. The government just wants to buy some computers and they want to get it at the most economical price. They'll put out a bid for that, right? And they'll typically go off the lowest price. I've talked with many of contracting officers who, especially on the state and local level, who primarily procure with bids, and they'll tell you, oh, they just look at price, right? So it's going to be lowest price. So it's very, very key that if you're putting a price in it, that you really understand your profit margins to make sure you're actually making money. So there's a slight difference between RFQ and bids, and that's what that is. So then you have also the RFI, which I mentioned earlier, which is to collect written information about the capabilities of various suppliers. Normally it follows a format that can be used for comparative purposes and is primarily used to gather information to help decide what steps to take next. Again, it's going to help them decide, should we actually turn this into an RFP or RFQ? Is there anybody out there in the industry that can do what we're looking for, right? Because they do have small business set-asides, or they can procure it to, open competition. They have to determine, are there enough small businesses that can perform that, so we can set it aside for small businesses? Are there enough women-owned or, service disabled or 8A, Hub Zone? Are there enough companies in this category or socioeconomic group that can perform that? So they gather information, for it. So when some people see RFI, they're like, oh, no, I don't want to respond to that. It's a request for information. I'm going to spend my time and resources only not to win a contract. However, if you don't respond to it and say, for instance, you are a small business and you are a woman-owned small business and you have the capabilities to do it, but nobody responds to it. They're going to think, well, there's nobody in the small business category that can do it. We're not going to set this, when we put this out for an RFP, we're not going to set it aside for women-owned small business because we don't know if there's enough women-owned small businesses that can be competitive in this. So we're just going to put it out for open and full competition. And that can include large businesses too. So I know that was a mouthful. Hopefully I'm not confusing anybody or being too wordy with it, but I would just put it like this. It's a strategy to use it, but it is also good to respond to those if it's something that you really feel like your company can do, and you can use that as a way to market to contracting officers. All right, so how do you find opportunities? Again, this is going to be shared, so it's very condensed. Local and city government, very simple. You can visit the city website and search for procurement opportunities under their, procurement tab or bid tab. They'll have it labeled sometimes differently for each city that you're trying to do business with, but you always want to look for bids, keywords like bids or procurement opportunities, suppliers. You want to look for those keywords and kind of follow those on your city government web pages, whether it's going to be like City of Atlanta, City of Douglasville, City of Chicago, you name it, right? You want to look into their website and look for those keywords. If it's the state government, you can search your opportunities in the state of, or you want to say solicitations in the state of Georgia or solicitations in the state of California. And each state has their own website that they use to post their actual opportunities. Okay, so it's always going to be posted on your state website. And I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into that too, right? Because there's other ways to find that, but this is going to be just one avenue to do it, just for informational purposes. That's one way to do it. You also want to register with your state to be eligible to bid and respond to opportunities. So say, for instance, in Georgia, right? I don't know where everyone's located. I don't know if everyone's in Georgia. Most likely, probably, since you're on an Invest Atlanta webinar, but just in case you're in other states, this is just what we do for Georgia, right? So we have Team Marketplace. Our state opportunities are going to be posted on Team Marketplace, as well as Georgia Procurement Registry, right? So we have that as well. But you actually need to register with Team Marketplace. So even if you find an opportunity on the Georgia Procurement Registry and you're like, oh, I want to go after that, or you find an opportunity on Team Marketplace and get excited about it, you, in some cases, can't even see all the documents unless you log in, right? Sometimes you can only just view the opportunities and you'll be prompt to log in. But also, even if you can see all the documents, you can't respond unless you actually have a login and you're actually registered with Team Marketplace. And that goes for every state that you do business with. We do business in multiple states. We do business in North Carolina. We also do business in Delaware. And we have to register through their system, which is their IPS. We have to do the same steps for each state that we do business in. So in order for us to actually do an e-bid or sometimes view all the documents for the solicitation. Now this is something that you can take a note of because I don't believe I have it on here, is some other ways that you can find opportunities. And if I need to put it in the chat, I can. You can use resources like BidNet Direct. You can also use resources like GovDirections. I love those resources because, again, this is the kind of step one, very high level. Go to your state website, right? Because you're just getting started, and see where they're hosting these opportunities. But if you have GovDirections or you have BidNet Direct and you register with them, you're actually able to view, they condense all the states. So they condense state, local, and federal all into one website. So you're able to see opportunities in California, you're able to see opportunities in New York, Colorado, you name it, without having to go to each individual state and do the steps that I just told you right now. You'll just be able to log in and you will be able to, search your industry, and then all those solicitations in your industry in multiple states will come up. And if you have, depending on your subscription, you can see all the ones with the local government, you can see it with education, and you can also see it with the federal government. So it makes your opportunity search way more easier than going to each individual state. For federal opportunities, you will go to sam.gov. That's where they host all of their opportunities. and that is federal only. You're not going to see state or local opportunities on sam.gov. That is for the federal government. But again, if you have these the subscriptions, excuse me, like Gov Directions or BitNet Direct, and there's other ones out there, the BizOps, there's other ones that are out there as well. Or BidSpeed, not BizOps, I'm sorry, BidSpeed. You can use BidSpeed as well. They condense all those opportunities on one site, so you're able to view that without doing multiple searches. So I guess we'll go at the end. I was gonna say any questions about that, but we can go over that at the end.
Before we jump, this is the last slide.
I think it's like 3 more, maybe 3 more slides.
Okay, just checking.
Oh,
I do want to add right here while we're looking at finding opportunities. I want to take this time to also talk about the ATLinBusiness, the ATLinBusiness Marketplace. And so we've been able to create, starting last year, to gather some resources here locally as well. So you'll see contracts from the City of Atlanta Procurement Office. You'll see contracts from like MARTA, Invest Atlanta, and other organizations that we're affiliated with that use the ATLinBusiness Marketplace for you to find opportunities as well. And so the website is ATLinBusiness.com. And when you go to, there's 4 pillars. You go to the last one, it'll say the marketplace. You can actually go there and make your own profile as well and be able to see organizations that post their contracts there. And so that's a new resource that we've been developing here in the city. And it's an opportunity for you to check there as well. Carry on.
all right. So hopefully, how are we on time? Because I want to make sure we're good with that. Because if not, I can make sure
let's go to the next slide. Well, how about this? Go to the next slide, and I'm going to give them a little teaser.
Okay. All right. So
this here, certifications. I got this side. I got it. I'm gonna hit this one. Certifications, right? I know you want to ask a lot of questions about certifications and disadvantaged business and minority business, enterprise, and all those things. That's great. And there's ways to get these certifications, and they do allow you to. What did you call it on your statement? These are capabilities. It was a word that was like that showed you like the differentiators. That was that word. All right, differentiators. And so these can be used to differentiate you and also kind of signify if I'm looking for a minority business partner or a woman-owned business, I can look and see if you fit my box already. And so I don't want to take too much time with this because I want you to join the webinar next Thursday where we actually have the SBA. I have representatives from the SBA to do a presentation to talk about certification and how those certifications show up when we're doing government and federal contracts. And so just know that you can take a screenshot, but I'm going to send you the presentation anyway. But these are just a few of the certifications, and we'll talk more in depth about certifications next week with the SBA. Cool.
Okay. All right. So we'll move past that. And then this is really going to kind of bring the presentation to a close, the strategic partnerships and just understanding what that is, right? So you get your business started, which we discussed the very basics of what you need to get yourself operated in the government space, talked about the capability statement. And you will talk about more in-depth certifications, next week. And we also talked about the different types of solicitations out there. Well, something also very important to keep in mind to help build your business is strategic partnerships, right? Understanding the difference between a prime contractor and a subcontractor, what that relationship looks like, a partnership and a joint venture. So just to go over that real quick, a prime contractor is a contractor that actually does business directly with the government customer, which means they are the ones that are signing a contract, say, for instance, with the Department of Navy, or they're the ones signing a contract with HHS, Health and Human Services. A subcontractor is the contractor that has a relationship with the prime, right? So they don't have a direct relationship with the customer. They only have a relationship with the prime contractor. And so that is why they're called a subcontractor. And typically they're utilized just to perform a portion of that contract, which we call the scope, right? Scope of work. You'll hear that term a lot. The scope of work is the details and what the contract and what they're looking for basically what they're looking for you to do, right, is the scope of work. And then sometimes they will subcontract out a portion of that scope to a subcontractor. So just to use an example on what that may look like, so there's times where we have served as a sub, and there's times that we have served as a prime. So for instance, we went after an opportunity, and this was actually with another training company. We had the contract directly with the customer. However, we worked with another company who had a certain skill set in the training area that we didn't necessarily provide. It would have taken us so much money, time, and resources to create this curriculum. You know, it's easy to hire someone. That's not really necessarily the issue, but I think it was really just creating that curriculum and creating that program, right? Why reinvent the wheel when we had a partnership, or we had a teaming partner that already did that? They already had all those resources. They already had the LMS that was needed. So what we did is we went in as the prime because we had the capabilities, and you know, we wrote the proposal, found the opportunity, had the relationship, but we did subcontract that portion of the work out to a subcontractor. And we were responsible, our portion of the contract was the contract management and the project management. So we did that portion of the scope, and we subbed it out to somebody else because it would have just taken us too much time and resources to figure that out. So that is the important also to have these strategic partnerships, because it does open the door to way more possibilities. Because if we didn't have that teaming partner, that would have eliminated us from that opportunity, excuse me, and many more. So that's heavily used. Partnerships, you can go into a partnership. We actually have a teaming partner that their actual business is set up as a partnership. It's 3 different companies, and they decided, or 2 different companies, I'm sorry, that decided to go into a partnership together, right? That's actually a legal entity. If you want to do that, that's something that we can talk more in depth with, you know, outside of this webinar, because obviously going into a legal binding agreement with another company is something that you really want to think heavily about, but it is an option in order to strengthen your business and strengthen your opportunities, or your chances of going after opportunities. And quickly, joint venture is very similar. It's 2 different companies that combine together legally for the sole purpose of doing business together. Again, that's a legal document. You actually have to go through the Secretary of State, and you actually have to become, you know, a joint venture legally and work with that. So it's like you're taking 2 companies and combining them to become one for the sole purpose of going after certain opportunities together. Again, a lot of companies do that to strengthen their opportunities and also strengthen, you know, their business in general. But the most common relationships are prime sub relationships. And this is our last slide. So why do we use strategic partnerships? Again, opens the door for more opportunity. You form teaming agreements to pursue a government contract. You create a pool of prime contractors and subcontractors. We have several prime contractors that we work with, and we also have several subcontractors. As a matter of fact, I had about, well, it's 4 meetings this week. I already did 2, and 2 more meetings just with prime contractors, because we are looking for subcontracting opportunities. We want to discuss subcontracting opportunities with them. So we keep multiple prime contractors available because that expands our opportunities. Our subcontractors help us perform certain work. It also helps you build up your past performance. Again, our strategy is to go into the federal space, and we primarily operate international and on the state and local level. So working with these larger primes that are already in the federal space will allow us to build up our past performance. So it is a strategy to work with these other companies. Building up your past performance is good for those that are new to government contracting. We talked about that with capability statement. Hey, what if I don't have this? Subcontracting is a very great way to build that up. Form these relationships with primes, you know, so you can perform on their contracts with them, focus on what you do, and not necessarily have to focus on the contract management piece, and build up your past performance, because their contract now becomes a part of your past performance. And it also helps you team with a company in the same industry, and also helps you get access to a target customer. So if there's an agency or a customer you want to have access to, but you have never worked with them, you know, working with, you know, Again, a prime contractor will help you build up your past performance and get access to those agencies. So I
Hey
believe
Danielle, I
that's
just
it.
to say thank you everyone for joining. We are at our 5 minute mark, so perfect timing. We do have some questions in the queue ready for you, Danielle. So
Okay.
at this time, if you do have about 5 or 10 minutes, we really would love to answer questions that our participants have. The first one we really would like to know is, how do you get these codes for your business? Are they listed somewhere? Where can they find out more information?
Yeah, you can actually go to Nate's Codes. They
Oh no, did we lose you?
on their actual website. Same thing with PSC and SIT. Another simple way to look up your NAICS codes, because everything is so robust now, you can literally say NAICS codes and janitorial services, and you'll get a list with new AI tools now that it's incorporated into Google. They will even actually, now just run off a list of NAICS codes that are in janitorial services, or NAICS codes that are in real estate, NAICS codes that are in training. So we don't necessarily have to search as hard as we used to back when I started. You actually can really use Google, and the AI is actually really good on helping you identify that. But again, if you just go to Google and you look for the NAICS code website, or Google the NAICS code website, you can search directly there.
Perfect. Thank you. And then we do have two other questions about prime and subcontracting. So one, how do you find prime contractor to be subtractor to? Where should they go? What should they do?
So there's so many ways, and I know we're so limited on time. So one way, I'll just use this as an example. I went to the NCMA Industry Day, right? Going to conferences and industry days are huge, but being very pointed about which ones you go to. But we went to the Industry Day, and that's specifically for government contractors. And so there's a lot of other businesses, large businesses and small businesses there that you can market. You can specifically say, hey, I'm looking to be a subcontractor, because that's what we were looking to do. We had 3 meetings set up just from last Thursday with prime contractors, setting up a pipeline, because we went in with a very pointed effort to say that we wanted to be a subcontractor to them. So networking, DSBS, which I mentioned, that SBA profile. So if you actually utilize the DSBS, you can see a list of companies that are on there. But another really great way that has worked for us in the past is when you actually find an opportunity, you can go to their pre-bid meeting and also network at pre-bid meetings. So if you identified a training solicitation, attend the pre-bid meeting, and you can network there as well, because those are obviously contractors in your same industry that you could potentially have some synergy with. So that's the quick answer, but
No, this is really great. And also one of the questions we had was around best practices for new contractors newly joined. And I think that helps to answer it. Are there any other opportunities outside of Atlanta and Business Marketplace or SAMS? Where do you recommend that they go and look for contracts if they're
those websites that I mentioned earlier, I mean, of course, ATLinBusiness, I know you guys have a resource for that as well. But yeah, the Gov Directions, BidNet Direct, those are other resources that you can use too.
Thank you so much, Danielle. Everyone is saying thank you in our chat. We don't have any further questions, so I'll leave about 30 seconds to get those questions in there while we do have this reliable resource, Danielle. So thank you so much. It has been so, so helpful. And just as a reminder, these artifacts will be sent to you. These links will be sent to you, so no need to panic. We'll get them to you as early as tomorrow.
Correct. And since we have this last little bit of time and no questions are coming in, everybody's just saying thank you. You did an amazing job, Danielle. Thank you so much for being so thorough and taking your time with us, because I'll not sure I'll ask all these questions at the very end. I ask a couple questions. There's a couple. Does the SAM registration have a fee?
No, it
Do
is
you
free.
know? No. All
You
right.
can
Is
hire
there an
somebody to do
invite for
that,
the
but it's free.
Oh, that's true. Um, then his last question says, is there an invite for the certification meetings? Like the pre-bid meetings? Is there invite only? How do you know those things are happening?
So you find those, the pre-bids that I was just talking about, where you can meet other contractors, Those happen on an individual solicitation base. So say, for instance, you're doing your opportunity search, you click on an opportunity, you're like, oh, I'm really interested in this one. It'll actually state if there's a pre-bid meeting for that. All opportunities don't necessarily have a pre-bid meeting, but if it does, and you are interested in it, just getting started, you may know, hey, I'm not capable to go after it just yet, right? We're researching, but I would use that as an opportunity to market. So even if you're not ready, do your solicitation search, click on it and see if it's a pre-bid meeting and attend.
Perfect, perfect. Well, that's all the questions. Listen, y'all, I appreciate you all for joining us. Danielle, thanks so much for coming in with us. I have you coming later on this month too, so we're gonna get a little more of Danielle's mind and all her expertise there. I thank you all for joining us. We had an amazing time here. I want to remind you, as I stated, that we will have a webinar next Thursday featuring the SBA, where we're going to talk about those certifications that you need to differentiate yourself as a business trying to get a contract. We'll be digging deep on that. If you're looking for the link to register for that, you can go to investatlanta.com/events. And they're all there, all the webinars for the rest of the month. So go ahead and register for one next week and the one after that as well. We look forward to seeing you all there. Again, this was recorded and it will be sent to you. So we all thank you all for joining us. Thank you so much. And Danielle's information will be included in the email. So no need to worry about how I'm going to find Danielle. I got you. Don't worry. We're taking care of this for you. So we're excited to have you all here. You have a great night. Thank you, Danielle, again. And we will see you all next week. Thank you all. Good night.
Bye.